Have you ever wondered why you do things that don't make sense? Why you sabotage what you care about, push people away when you need them most, attract people you need the least, or replay the same mistakes over and over? What if I told you that the answers aren't in what you're looking for, but in what you refuse to see? Something ugly, uncomfortable, and gross you've been hiding from yourself all along. Somewhere buried deep in your mind, there's a part of you that you don't fully know, a part that watches, waits, and steps in when you're not looking. It's the part that keeps old wounds alive, that whispers doubts when you're close to succeeding, or pulls you back into places you swore you'd never return to. You've felt it before, haven't you? That quiet, unsettling pull towards the things you want to avoid, the unconscious. We often avoid it because of the familiarity of the surface in our rational world of things. We carefully brush over the holes caused by the outbursts of the ugly with beautiful but crumbling paint of logic, slowly letting pressure build up, waiting for the next outburst. In classic, you can run but I'll catch you fashion. Meet Trevor Resnick, a machinist, the machinist, in fact, like it says in the title, who hasn't slept in over a year, leaving him pale, mentally unstable, and most importantly, in serious need of a bulk. Christian Bale weighed around 54 kg and he wanted to cut even more, which is crazy. His life is a mostly monotonous routine of work and isolation, with brief connections to Stevie, a compassionate sex worker, and Maria, a kind waitress at the airport cafe. From the very onset, the movie is kind of grotesque, to say the least. But it gets weirder when one day at work, Trevor is distracted by a coworker named Ivan, a man no one else seems to know. This distraction causes a terrible accident in which his colleague Miller loses an arm. Blamed by his co-workers and overcome with guilt, Trevor becomes obsessed with Ivan, whom he suspects is connected to a larger conspiracy. Meanwhile, strange things start happening in Trevor's life. He finds post-it notes stuck to his refrigerator with unfinished hangman puzzles. At first, he dismisses them, but their presence becomes increasingly unsettling. Trevor's paranoia intensifies as he starts to suspect that his coworkers are out to get him. He even visits Miller, the one-armed guy, and suspects him of plotting some kind of revenge on him. Ivan reappears multiple times, taunting Trevor, but every attempt to prove Ivan's existence leads to nowhere. His co-workers deny knowing him, and Trevor begins to doubt his own sanity. He discovers Ivan driving a red convertible and follows him, only to realize that the car is registered in Trevor's name. As Trevor tries to unravel the mystery, his relationships with Stevie and Maria deteriorate. Stevie grows frustrated with Trevor's growing instability, while Maria, who seemed like a warm presence in his life, suddenly disappears. Trevor's world becomes more fragmented and the strange occurrences escalate. The post-it notes on his fridge, the mysterious appearances of Ivan, and the strange events in his life all seem connected, but their meaning eludes him. In a final act of desperation, Trevor breaks into his landlord's office to find evidence of Ivan's existence. What he finds instead is a picture of himself and Ivan together, laughing.
What is the big deal about a goddamn picture?
They say the guy in this photo doesn't exist. This says he does.
Trevor, I don't understand what the fuck you're talking
I'm
about.
talking about your ex. Ivan!
Who? This guy's standing next to you with a fish?
I'm not in that photo.
Trevor, I'm looking at a picture of you standing next to some fat guy with glasses holding a fish.
Only to later realize that it's just him in the picture. The revelation shatters him. If Ivan is a figment of his imagination, what else in his life isn't real? Trevor begins to realize that his mind has been playing tricks on him, but the full truth still eludes him. It isn't until he retraces his steps from a year ago, the beginning of his insomnia, that everything becomes clear. Trevor remembers that he accidentally hit and killed a young boy with his car in a hit-and-run accident. The hangman puzzle, which he completes at last, spells out the word killer, confirming the truth he has been avoiding. In the final moments of the film, Trevor makes a choice. He walks into a police station, confesses to the crime, and surrenders himself. As he's placed in a jail cell, he lies down and closes his eyes. For the first time in a year, Trevor sleeps, finally freed from the torment of his repressed guilt. Trevor Resnick's story is much more than a weird psychological thriller. It's a visceral depiction of Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, repression, and the unconscious. Obviously, we only see what happens on the surface of consciousness in the film, something that can be examined through our senses and analyzed. But I think the unsettling nature of this film comes exactly from awakening the unconscious in the viewer. Is that weird feeling when watching it. What makes The Machinist so compelling is how it illustrates Jung's idea that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge don't simply disappear, they fester in the unconscious and manifest in ways we cannot control. Trevor's insomnia, hallucinations, and paranoia are not just symptoms of a guilty mind, they are the consequences of his shadow gaining dominance over him. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents the parts of ourselves we suppress or deny, often the darker, undesirable aspects of our psyche. Trevor's shadow is personified in the film as Ivan, a figure who is everything Trevor refuses to acknowledge about himself, carefree, confident, and unapologetically reckless. Ivan's taunting and sinister presence serve as a constant reminder of Trevor's guilt and the darker side of his nature that he refuses to face. By externalizing his shadow as Ivan, Trevor distances himself from his own blame, but in doing so, he allows it to control his life from the shadows. It is a common theme in psychology called dissociation, whether it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or Fight Club. Jung emphasized that repressed emotions, particularly guilt and shame, don't disappear, they influence our thoughts, behaviors, and perceptions. Trevor's repression of the hit-and-run accident is the root cause of his insomnia and deteriorating mental state. Not integrating the memory into his conscious awareness leads to psychological fragmentation, with his mind creating elaborate hallucinations to keep the truth buried. I think some people wouldn't think of Carl Jung when watching The Machinist, since Jung puts a lot of emphasis on dreams and, well, Trevor is an insomniac. Jung often emphasized that when dreaming, the unconscious interacts with the conscious mind with ideas, or rather symbols, which have two meanings. The obvious one, like, for example, a dog with, 4 legs, a tail, fur, and so on. But in the dream, this descriptive meaning often has no significance at all. Rather, the unconscious meaning is what's important. And while there are certain archetypes with which we all associate the unconscious meaning with, only the dreamer knows the exact unconscious meaning. In our case, the daydreamer escaped sleep, hoping to escape the dream realm where the unconscious is strong, until the unconscious became so dominant that it caused hallucinations in the waking state. The cryptic post-it notes and Ivan's appearances are Trevor's unconscious attempting to force him to confront the guilt he has suppressed. All these things make zero sense rationally, but have a deep emotional weight. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious with the conscious self, is central to the film's resolution. Trevor's journey is one of integration as he moves from denial and repression to acceptance and accountability. By finally confronting the truth of his actions, Trevor takes the first step towards wholeness. Turning himself in is not just an act of justice, it's an act of self-healing. In Jungian terms, Trevor has faced his shadow, acknowledged its power, and reintegrated it into his conscious mind. His ability to sleep, in the end, signifies this newfound balance. Much like Trevor, we all carry shadows, unresolved emotions, unacknowledged truths, or traits we'd rather not face. These hidden parts of ourselves often create barriers in our relationships, making us distant, reactive, or emotionally unavailable. But just as Trevor's painful process of self-awareness led to healing, we too can transform our lives and relationships by embracing the unconscious and integrating the parts of ourselves we've neglected. In our relationships, the shadow often shows up through projection. When we avoid acknowledging parts of ourselves, like insecurities, jealousy, or anger, we tend to project these onto others. Have you ever found yourself intensely disliking someone for no apparent reason, or maybe being triggered by a small habit or behavior in a partner? This could be the shadow at work. By becoming aware of the parts of ourselves that we dislike or suppress, we can stop projecting them onto others. Instead of blaming others for our discomfort, we take ownership of those feelings and explore where they're coming from within us. This creates healthier, more empathetic connections. When we accept our shadows, we no longer see it as a threat and can instead work through conflicts with a clearer mind and open heart. With daily reflection or journaling, you can set aside time each day to reflect on your emotions and actions. Write about aspects of yourself you may have been suppressing. Is there something in your life you're avoiding? Often confronting these feelings directly helps bring unconscious issue to the surface. The persona is the mask we wear in social interactions, and while sometimes it's necessary for functioning in the world, it can also disconnect us from our true self if it becomes too rigid. How often do we hide parts of ourselves to meet societal expectations or to fit in with those around us? Maybe we suppress vulnerability, creativity, or assertiveness because we're afraid of judgment. To improve our relationships, we need to find the balance between the persona and the authentic self. By letting go of the need to constantly uphold a perfect mask, we create a space for real, meaningful connections. People are drawn to authenticity when we show up as ourselves, imperfections and all. We invite others to do the same. This mutual openness fosters trust and intimacy. Jung believed that we all possess both masculine and feminine energies, the anima and animus. And while in The Machinist, it was probably Maria that represented the anima in Trevor. We don't know if she's real or just a product of Trevor's imagination, but she's nurturing, warm, and forgiving, qualities that Trevor lacks in his current fragmented state. She represents hope and redemption in Trevor's bleak, deteriorating world. Her kindness and willingness to accept Trevor hint at his potential to find forgiveness and peace, but only if he confronts the truth. So anima, the feminine in men, and animus, the masculine in women. Integrating these energies leads to a more balanced and whole self. In relationships, many issues arise when we don't acknowledge or nurture these aspects within us. For example, a man may neglect his emotional side, the anima, while a woman might ignore her assertiveness and independence, the animus. And as we already know, ignoring and suppressing certain aspects of our psyche can make them stronger and unhealthier. By embracing and integrating both sides of ourselves, we become more complete individuals. In relationships, this means we can approach others with greater understanding, allowing for more dynamic, flexible interactions, rather than feeling stuck in rigid gender roles or outdated expectations. We become freer to engage authentically with the people in our lives. Jung saw symbols as a language of the unconscious, and when we understand the meaning behind the symbols in our lives, we can create deeper connections. Pay attention to the symbols that arise in your relationships, recurring themes in arguments, patterns in behavior, or the way certain people or situations make you feel. These are all reflections of your unconscious mind trying to get your attention. You can also keep a dream journal, even if you don't remember your dreams vividly. Keep a notebook beside your bed and try to record any fragments of dreams you remember upon waking up. Over time, patterns and symbols may emerge. Reflect on recurring themes in your dreams. Are there certain symbols, such as an animal, a person, or an event, that keep appearing? What might they represent about your unconscious thoughts, desires, or fears? By taking the time to reflect on these symbols, whether it's recurring frustration, a particular word or phrase that stands out, or a pattern you keep encountering, you can begin to address the underlying issues. Effective communication is often about understanding what's unsaid, what's buried beneath the surface. By listening to the subtle messages of our unconscious and being open to what they reveal, we can improve not just how we relate to others, but also how we understand ourselves. In relationships, individuation, so integrating the conscious and unconscious, helps us break free from unhealthy patterns and codependency. We all feel pulled towards people that display characteristics which we lack. That can create very unhealthy relationship dynamics. For instance, a highly structured, rigid individual might be drawn to someone carefree and spontaneous. While this balance can initially seem positive, it can lead to unhealthy dynamics if it's based on unresolved personal deficiencies. Over time, the traits we're attracted to can become sources of conflict. The structured person may resent the spontaneous partner for being too chaotic, while the spontaneous partner might feel stifled by the rigid one. Two different partners lack the exact opposites. This is important. As we work to become whole, we stop relying on others to fill the gaps in our own identity. We become more self-sufficient and emotionally resilient, which allows us to offer more to others. As we move towards integration, our relationships become more authentic, mature, and fulfilling, because they are no longer about avoiding ourselves or our shadow. They are about two people fully present and engaged with each other. As we integrate our shadow, persona, anima, and other unconscious elements, we not only grow as individuals, but also enrich our interactions with others. Ultimately, the key to thriving in our relationships with both others and ourselves is our willingness to confront and embrace the truths we've been avoiding. And in doing so, we allow ourselves to live more fully with greater love, trust, and understanding. And with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for next one.